Hey there again, editors and creators. This is part 4 in the series on how to get great looking video out of Vegas Pro. Now, I should probably remind you that if you haven't watched the first 3 parts, that's going to be well worth doing. That will just give you a bit of context as to why we have to approach this the way we do. This part is geared at people who are creating primarily video content for video formats. So that is somebody who goes out and shoots with a video camera, a mirrorless camera, something like that. You might be using stock images or other people's footage from somewhere, or you might even be doing some screen recording. In a lot of those cases, the content that you're going to be getting from those sources is going to be at video levels. And it's also worth pointing out that most of the places that you're going to be delivering your video to, regardless of where it started, is going to need to be at video levels. So for example, I'm capturing this using OBS. Right now, a lot of you will use that. So here is an example of an image that has been captured straight out of OBS with the default settings. Now what you'll notice about this is that this sits between 100 and 0 IRE. We are using the studio levels. So what that tells us is that this is actually video level content. And if you look at the settings, and I can bring them up and show you. These are the OBS settings. So if you use OBS, in addition to a lot of other screen recording software, you'll notice that the color range that it uses is video levels. Okay, they describe it in OBS, if you go down into the advanced settings, as partial. So because I'm recording at the moment, I can't change this, but that can be changed from partial to full. But by default, it is set to partial. So that is a good example of video content you may not realize is actually video content. If you open this file up, the screen recording, in another application, so if I open it up in DaVinci Resolve or Premiere, what that will do is it will stretch it out to full range. Okay, it'll perform essentially that process there, all right, which I've used the SEMW extension I've talked about to do. And you will end up with a preview that looks like this, because that is what it's going to look like when it gets delivered out to a video format. Let me just flick back so you can see what it looks like in Vegas. So you can see it's a little bit grey. You'll also have noticed that the video range in here is between 0 and 100. When we look at the output range, you'll see that it is from -7 all the way up to 109. Okay, so outside in those illegal ranges, or in the full range, if you like, which is illegal for video formats. Okay, so how do you go about dealing with video content? Well, if you're using primarily video content, there's essentially 3 ways that you can deal with it. So we'll have a look at each one of those. Let me just bring these up here. Okay, so option number 1. All right, so the first option is using external monitoring. Now this is probably the way that Vegas was originally designed, because back in the days when Vegas has been around for a long time, and back in the early days of video editing, the kinds of people who were doing digital video editing were pretty serious about it, and they were using external monitors. They had the resources to be able to do it properly. Nowadays, of course, most people who are using Vegas and Vegas Movie Studio, and in fact any of these applications, are typically relying on their computer monitor, even just a little preview like this, in order to monitor their video content. So because of that, this does not necessarily work quite so well for them. But this still remains a good option. If you've got a second monitor that you can plug into your computer, or if you've got a dedicated video output card, this is something you can do. This little button up here, the video preview on external monitor, is the thing that will activate it. And to set it up, you just right click on the preview and you can go to Preview Device Preferences. And you can see we get this option. Now I've got a couple of different options here. I've got a Blackmagic card that I've got connected that I can output to a video monitor. But you can equally use just your Windows graphics card. So that's just another video output if you've got it on your computer. Just make sure that you have this ticked here. This adjust levels from studio RGB to computer RGB. All right, and then you can output it. Then what you would do is you would rely on that external monitor as your video content. That will give you correct levels. So it's good if you're dealing with mainly video content. What it will do is when it outputs it to the external monitor, it will stretch it out so that it fills the full range of luminance levels. The advantage of doing this is that it is literally just to create, throw it all together, and then click render. You don't have to do anything else. couple of disadvantages. The first thing is, as you can see here, Vegas's own preview will look a bit washed out. So as a general rule, okay, that's what it should look like. That's what it's going to look like when I upload it to YouTube. But this is what it's looking like at the moment. So as a general rule, this preview is not going to be that reliable, and people who use external monitors may just turn this off altogether. Okay, you've got a little X, you can just get rid of it. Second issue is that Vegas generated text and graphics and still images will suffer from a minor color shift. We talked a little bit back about this back in the scopes episode, but essentially what is happening is that when you go to render the stuff out, if it starts at video levels and then it gets stretched out, the levels that you are looking at on here are going to be stretched. So we talked about this when we were talking about the color bars and how the Vegas color bars were designed to be stretched. So these colors that we're looking at on here are not going to be the colors that get displayed. All right, those are the colors that get displayed. These colors are not going to be the colors that get displayed. Now, of course, if you're looking at it on an external monitor, that's not a problem because the colors on the external monitor will be correct. But if you were to do something like, for example, if I took a quick color gradient and say I was trying to, let me put this over here, say I was wanting to use color picker to find out, whether or not I had the right color. If I clicked on this, it's going to give me a sort of pre-stretched value. Now this is actually technically the correct value for SMPTE color bars, but the original value for SMPTE color bars doesn't account for the fact that is designed to account at least for the fact that the video is going to be stretched. So you see, if I render this out and this is the result that we're going to get, it is actually going to give me a different color. So we'll go to that same green and you can see now we've got a different color. Okay, so that may or may not be important to you depending on what kinds of things you are doing with your content, but it is worth keeping in mind, basically if you are working with graphics and things like that. Now the next thing is that if you are using LUTs or external OFX, they may not affect the footage correctly, and that is because most LUTs are designed for full range levels. So if you are feeding at video levels, you're not necessarily going to get the same results as if you are feeding at full range levels. And like I say, when you get one of these video levels clips and you drop them into something like DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro, those applications are going to stretch the video out to make sure that it is at full range levels, and then they're going to feed it to a LUT, and so the LUT is going to act on the full range stretched signal, which is then going to be compressed back down once it's been processed through the LUT in order to be encoded to the delivery format. That's all quite complicated sounding, but just trust me. If you are wanting to use external monitoring, or in fact any of these techniques for video stuff, it is primarily if you're just cutting together a quick video, and actually Vegas is absolutely perfect for that kind of thing. You just grab a whole lot of video, throw it together on a timeline, very, very quick to throw it all together and click render. And then you'll get, reasonably good results, provided you keep those things in mind. Okay, so that is option number one, all right? Using external monitoring, making sure that your video scopes are set to the studio RGB levels, as you can see here. And then you can make sure that from there, you just keep everything between the 100 and the 0, and you're going to end up with good results. All right, that is option number one. Let me just go back over to here and bring up, option number 2. All right. Suggestion number 2 is using the preview levels extension. Now I've talked quite a lot about this as we've gone through this series, so you will hopefully be familiar with it now. The link is in the description below if you're interested. The preview levels extension just sits up here and it changes the levels that are visible within the Vegas preview. So if you haven't got an external monitor to be able to preview it at the correct levels, this is quite a good way of doing it. So when I click on PC, and this is the one that I normally use, PC will basically stretch the video in both directions. So you see, if I go with this one, go back to original, Okay, this is what the Vegas preview natively looks like. When I go to PC, you'll see that it stretches up and also stretches down. Okay, so it is stretching it now into this illegal range, which is actually not what we want. But one thing to keep in mind is if you're using this, you also need to set this up so that you're using full range levels. Okay, and that will give you a good indication of what is going to be clipping or what is going to be lost. All right. So the way to use this is basically to have it set to PC and then just to adjust your video content so that it looks right in this preview, because this preview will give you a good indication of what it's going to look like elsewhere. So if I go into here, and you might remember from this clip, this was the one where there was quite a lot of clipping going on in her hat, and that was because in the original, if I go to the original clip and we look at it in Studio RGB levels, you'll see that there's quite a lot going on above 100. Okay, so this is what was called super white. It's very, very common on modern cameras. This was from just a Sony mirrorless camera. So this is really common with the default footage that comes out of them. So in here you can see the clipping is not so bad. We've got a little bit of detail left in her hat. When I go to actually view it using this extension, I can tell straight away that this is all going to clip. Okay, and furthermore, if I have this set to full range, I can see that it's clipping up the top here. Okay, so this is giving me a pretty good indication of what it's going to look like and how it's going to behave in here. So this is quite a useful tool, but you need to make sure that it is kept on. The way that it works, if I just flick back onto there, basically when you go to use it and you do all of your grading and your correction in here, make all of the changes that you want to, and then when you go to render, you don't do anything else. So long as it looks good here, this effect, which operates basically as a dedicated video effect, so that is basically the preview extension there, that will get disabled. Okay, and it will get rendered out like this. Okay, so it'll be rendered out, as you can see when I disabled it, it went a little bit grey, so it'll be rendered out looking a little bit grey like that, but that will come out looking like this when you upload it to YouTube or wherever else it's going. The other nice thing about this, it is free and available, and it includes some other tools as well. So if I go to tools and extensions and SEMW, you can see there's a few little tools in here, some of which may be quite handy for you, including the preview levels in there. All right, disadvantages of it. Same problem really as the external monitor. So if you're using generated media, text and graphics, they'll suffer a color shift. Okay, so even when you can see the color shift as it occurs on here if you're using this preview extension, but it is going to happen. Okay, so the third suggestion that I would have for dealing with this is using the Tim's Tools Perfect Exposure tool, especially designed for Vegas Pro. Now, this tool is basically designed to allow you to make changes to your footage without having to worry about how you go about reading scopes or any of those other sort of complicated things. You don't have to have an external monitor. You can rely on the colors in order to be able to give you a good indication of whether or not things are correctly exposed. So there's a number of advantages to this tool. The first thing is it's easy to use. You don't need to understand scopes. It's fun, but it still is going to give you a nice reliable result. In addition to making sure that your levels are correct, it will also give you a good indication of grey card exposure, and also give you a good indication for skin tone exposure for quick shot matching as well. And really they're the same disadvantages as any video type workflow, and that is if you're trying to get your content into video levels so that you can just click render and make sure that it will be output correctly, then you're not necessarily going to be able to work so easily with graphics and text and LUTs and things that are designed for full range levels. Anyway, let me see if I can show you how it works. Now, in the last few versions of Vegas Pro, there has been this FX here called LUT filter. If you're using an older version, I think Vegas 14 or before, you can get hold of, there's a number of different LUT plugins that allow you the same functionality. Companies like Vision Color, I think, offer them. So if you're using a recent version of Vegas, you should have this. Now, I've already set this up with some of my other tools, but it's very easy to use. If you don't have the presets already there, you can just grab default, and of course the FX can be dragged directly onto individual clips. They can be dragged right onto the timeline, so they'll affect everything, or they can be dragged onto an individual track. Now I find in my case the easiest way to use this particular tool is to drag it onto the track that you've got your video content on, and you'll get something like this pop up. We then navigate to find the tool, okay, and you'll see that the image will immediately change. Okay, I don't need this anymore for now, so let's just shut it down. Okay, now what this is telling me is the purple area here is things that are going to be black, which is what we want in this particular shot. You remember this shot had lots of black around it. Anything that is, see if I can find something here, where you can see little bits of red there, those are going to be white. Okay, so those are going to be clipping at white. Let me just grab a better example. Here you go. Okay, so you can see here we've got a lot of clipping going on in this clip. You remember this was the one that was filmed on a mirrorless camera, but it included super whites. Okay, so all those super whites have been picked up by this tool, and they're all very visible. So essentially we've got red is clipping at the top, purple is clipping at the bottom. We haven't got really any purple going on in here. And then we've got all the colors in between, going through dark blue into light blue, and then we get dark gray and into light gray, and then yellow and orange and red up to the top. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of green here as well. Green is the point that you should use for exposing an 18% gray card. So if you want correct exposure from your gray card, it's a 45 IRE gray card exposure tool. Obviously it's not going to apply to every shot that you take, but it might be handy as a reference. The sort of peach color is what you should be aiming for with skin tones. So the skin tones on here at the moment are looking pretty good. Of course there's other problems in this shot, but you can see here we've got some dark grey in the shadows, light grey, and then we've got, you know, a bit of peach in there as well. So that's pretty good. If we wanted to go about correcting this shot though, we can do that quite easily. Now I've got some useful tools in Vegas. I've got the color grading kind of workflow, so I can bring that up. But of course, if you don't have Vegas Pro 17 and you don't have this particular tool, you can use levels or curves or whatever else you've got. I'm just going to do it quickly here. The main problem we can see with this shot is that red. So let's just get rid of the red, possibly in cases we might want a little bit of red in some points, so we've got a tiny bit up there. Okay, and then we can probably actually have a little bit, we can probably just touch the purple as well down there. Okay, so we can see just a tiny little dot of purple, okay, where we know that it's black, okay, while still having enough shadow detail. Okay, so that's that shot more or less corrected. Now if we had a shot like this, and you'll remember this was a still image, so this was a full range image. Incidentally, I don't need the scope, so let's get rid of those. Okay, so the full range image, you can see quite clearly we've got lots of purple going on and we've got red, so we can make those changes. Let's get rid of the red and get rid of the, oops, get rid of the purple, or maybe just have it just starting to touch the purple. Okay, and that one's done. If you look at the video level clips that we had here, you can see they're pretty well balanced. Okay, this was another one that was a video level clip. That was the screen recording. This one here is a video level clip, so you can see we're clipping up the top here, but we can probably give it a little bit more contrast down the bottom in the blacks. Okay, so you can see we can go down here and we know exactly how far we can go, because once we start to get into the purple, you see we're crushing it. Okay, so we've got plenty of control over that. All right, and now I can probably take that up again. Okay, so I can make those changes really quickly and easily and know that I'm going to get nice dependable results. Once you've finished making the changes to the footage, you just simply turn that tool off or delete it if you want to, and you've got correctly exposure balanced images. Now keeping in mind these images are still being previewed on the Vegas preview, so this is one other thing to note about this. If you want to look at how it's going to look, that's how it's going to end up actually looking. Hold on, let me just see if I can get rid of, okay. If you want to have a look at how it's actually going to look on, say, YouTube or somewhere, then we can use this extension, or you can use your external monitor. But this is correct in terms of the scopes, and we can check that. Okay, we can see here we're right between 0 and 100 using only that tool. Okay, same thing, we look at this, right between 0 and 100. Okay, whereas if we look at an image that I didn't touch, You can see here I didn't use the tool on it, so we're well outside, so we're going to end up with crushed blacks and clipped highlights. So that is the Tim's Tools Perfect Exposure for Vegas Pro. So as I said, this is a tool that is ideal if you are working primarily with video, and if you just want to, from here, simply click File, Render As, go to H.264 or something and render out a video without having to worry about any other effects in order to get your content correct. So that is perhaps a useful tool for you. If it is, the link is in the description down below, so you can check that out. And otherwise, tune in to the next episode and we will be talking a little bit more about what if you want to use graphics or full range still images or other full range video in your content, how you should be going about addressing that. Thanks for watching.